You're listening to Sweet Talk, all things maple.
Welcome to Sweet Talk, all things maple. I'm Aaron Whiteman, co-director of the Cornell Maple Program at Cornell University. Joining me, as always, is my colleague and co-host, Adam Wild. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Aaron. Before we begin this episode, as a reminder to all maple producers in the U.S., make sure you complete your USDA Maple Syrup Crop Report survey. Having accurate data on maple production helps to support the industry. All of your data is kept confidential and is only used to gauge the production season.
Surveys were mailed out last week. If you don't receive one, you can visit nass.usda.gov and sign up to be counted next year.
Yeah, I just received my survey yesterday, and I need to get that filled out. I know that data is really important, and I want to make sure our facility is included with that. Aaron, it sounds like you made it home safely from your trip to the Clyne Forest in Vermont. How was your trip overall?
Well, it's always good spending time with you at the Clyne. And in Vermont, I attended the Maple Equipment open houses and gave presentations, including a talk on maple confections and new product development.
I know there's always a lot of interest in that topic. Did you have a good turnout overall?
Yeah, there was a good crowd, and I had a lot of information and even some samples to share. But I am not a food scientist, so sometimes there are questions from the audience that I can't answer.
I know what you mean. We both spent a lot of time working on all aspects of maple, but food science and all the regulations around food can be really complex, right?
That's right, and that is why we have a very special guest on today's program. Joining us now is our very own maple food scientist, Dr. Catherine Belisle. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back.
Catherine, this is your second appearance on our show, but for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your role in the Cornell Maple Program?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at the Cornell Maple Program for about 3 years, and before then, I was in school studying food science and horticulture sciences. So my focus is helping producers to make new value-added products, help with regulatory issues, and work with some food safety issues.
Thanks for that, Catherine. We're so glad you could join us today. What we'd like to focus on today is kitchen certification because this is a topic we get a lot of questions about. So let's start with the basics and talk about what we mean by certification. Catherine, can you explain what we're talking about when we refer to a licensed or certified kitchen?
Yeah, so a licensed or certified kitchen is one that is regulated by the FDA or State Department or even both.
Yeah, and I think in the maple industry, there's been a lot of apprehension about wanting to avoid having a certified kitchen by all costs and seeing what products we can make without crossing that line of needing a certified kitchen, right? But you guys at the Arnot Forest recently went through that process and had your kitchen certified. So congratulations on that. From your experience, how was it? Was there was it easy? Was it painful to go through that process?
So the process of getting the 20C license for our maple lab was pretty straightforward. We reached out to New York State Ag and Markets and talked with them about, hey, what kind of things do we need to have in our kitchen? And what is the process of having you come out to review our kitchen and see maybe what is necessary for us to add in? So we had the inspector come out before we submitted any paperwork, and he was able to look through our facility and tell us different things that we needed to correct, things that we were doing correctly, and we were able to fix anything that was necessary or add anything that was necessary before we went through the certified kitchen process.
Yeah, and I would just say that it was surprisingly pleasant. I mean, the person who came from Ag and Markets was really helpful and friendly, and he gave us some really clear instructions. So we basically just had a checklist that we had to go through, some things we had to change or correct, and it wasn't onerous at all. Wouldn't you agree, Catherine?
Yeah, it was really great. Actually, one of the interesting things that I found whenever we were getting our kitchen certified was that I was told by many maple producers that we needed to have a 3-bay sink. So I asked our inspector, and since we don't sell our products for retail, we only sell wholesale, we actually didn't even need a 3-bay sink. So that was a pleasant surprise too. He was able to answer all of the questions that we had, and the one or two that he wasn't able to answer, he was able to get back to us within a few days.
So what were some of the things that you had to actually change at the Arnot Forest to get your kitchen to be certified?
Yes, so our changes were actually pretty minor. There were things like we had to add self-closing hinges to the bathroom door because we have a restroom within the kitchen. We had to add backflow prevention to our sink, which really wasn't all that hard. The pipes just couldn't be like hard connected to the bottom of the sink. And instead, the wastewater from the sink flows into a little catchment bowl and then down the waste line. And what that does is it would prevent sewer from ever backing up into the sink. We had to paint over some treated lumber in our evaporator room with paint. And I think that was most of it. What were the other steps, Catherine? The other things we had to rectify?
So there were two other things that come to mind. One was that we needed to add hand wash signs above each sink, particularly a hand wash sink and the bathroom sink. And then we also had to establish a good manufacturing practices protocol. And this was pretty much protocol so that we could remove any pests that came into the kitchen. We had personnel training so that everyone knew where the gloves were, what the hand washing protocol was. Really simple stuff, but stuff that's really essential to have a safe food facility.
Did they provide a guideline sort of for you to follow in creating those protocols, kind of a template to follow?
Yeah, actually, they have it available online as a PDF. And so it has all of the good manufacturing practices that are necessary for 20C kitchens. And it was really easy to follow.
One of the things that I thought was most helpful that came about as a result of the certification process was our cleaning protocol. So we have a schedule of when we clean and what we clean. And just having that schedule, I think, helps us maintain a really high level of cleanliness. And it also raises everyone's awareness of the things that we need to keep clean.
Aaron, I think you alluded towards something in your evaporator room. If you have a separate kitchen area, does what's in your kind of evaporator room or the rest of the sugar house, does that come into play within the certification process?
I think for us, because our evaporator room is immediately adjacent to our certified kitchen, and you just walk through a door into the evaporator room, that they also inspected that. But a typical sugaring operation doesn't have a lot of components that would fall under that regulation anyway. But because we have beams within the room that could potentially have sap contact them, I think, and they were treated lumber, they just wanted to make sure that there was no exposure to that. It wasn't really a big deal. I just had to paint over a few of the support beams in the evaporator room.
Yeah, our 20C kitchen doesn't technically include the sugar house. However, we are supposed to follow good manufacturing practices in our sugar house, and that's a state law across multiple states. But as far as our inspections go, we don't have to have our sugar house inspected when the inspector comes each year. We only have to have our 20C kitchen inspected.
What was the timeline to actually go through the process once you contacted the inspector to actually get that stamped certified kitchen certificate?
So for us, it took about 6 months, but we had to go through the university to make sure that everything was okay on that end. For a typical maple producer, they're looking at closer to 3 months. Now, if they're in the process of building their operation, of course, that can take longer because they may need to order a 3-bay sink, for instance, if that's required for their operation.
What's the cost, the fee for applying and getting that certification for New York State at least?
Yeah, so for New York State, if you are a small producer, meaning that you have less than 10 employees, then the fee is $175 every 2 years. And if you have more than 10 employees, then the cost is $400 every 2 years.
So it sounds like most sugar makers probably would fall under that smaller, less than 10 employees. And so you mentioned that you need fees for every 2 years. What's the kind of recertification or inspection process? Are they coming monthly, or is that every 2 years or once a year?
So once you're certified, you'll have a random inspection at least once per year. If you pass that inspection, which if you're following all of the protocols and the guidelines that were set up when you initially had your kitchen, you should pass without an issue. So if you pass, only once per year. If you have some things that need corrected, then the inspector will come back after that annual evaluation.
And Catherine, I don't remember this part, I think because you did most of the work. Was there a lot of paperwork involved in the application process, or was it fairly straightforward?
No, the paperwork was pretty simple. We actually just had one form to fill out.
So the Arnot Forest is in a rather remote location, and so I'm pretty sure you don't have municipal water supply there. So I think you're working on a well, correct? And did that have any complications? A lot of sugar makers are on a well as well.
Yeah, this question is a little tricky because we're actually a municipal water supply. So what would be required for someone who's using their private well? Would they have to have a chlorinator or just tests by the health department?
So they would have to have their well water treated, and it would need to be documented and approved by the local health department. But I don't know how often that needs to be inspected. You want to check with your local health department to make sure that your water is properly treated, and then ask your state inspector so that you can know how often you need to test your water.
So circling back to worker safety, you mentioned that there was some training for anyone who's going to work in the kitchen. What kind of training was that?
So the training that's required, it actually falls under good manufacturing practices. And that training includes things like wearing your hair back if you have long hair while you're making the food product, wearing gloves, washing your hands every 4 hours, wearing proper shoes and proper clothing, not wearing jewelry that will potentially fall into the foods, and covering up any cuts that you might have with Band-Aids and proper gloves. It also includes proper washing of your utensils and materials and proper sanitation procedures.
And to be clear, this isn't training that we had to go away to, right? You actually administered the training to our team. Where did you find those training materials?
So because of my food science background, I was able to give the training because I had received that training in school. Individuals who are getting a 20C license, particularly the ones who are managing the kitchen, may be required to take an additional good manufacturing practices course or a preventative controls course, and that will be instructed by your inspector. Because I've already had those trainings, I didn't need to get an additional training. With the personnel that work at our facility, I was able to develop a good manufacturing practices plan and teach all of our staff about personnel safety, different sanitary procedures, how to clean equipment, and so forth.
And what about handling of any hazardous chemicals or anything like that? Was that covered in the training?
Yeah, so that's a really great point. When you're handling hazardous chemicals, we had to instruct all of our colleagues to store chemicals in a separate container that was not in contact with any food substances. And we also instructed them on how to label containers if we were making a bleach dilution, for instance. And so that would include things like what the solution is. So it would be bleach plus water. And then what percentage of that solution was bleach, the date that the substance was mixed, and the employee's initials. So things like that are really important so all employees know what's going on in the kitchen. They feel safe using containers because they're properly labeled and they're put in safe places.
I think that labeling requirement is really helpful. You know, you think, oh, I know what this is, and you put it in the refrigerator and then you forget about it, or someone else comes in and they don't know what's in a container. It just leads to a lot of confusion. I think that labeling requirement has led to a great improvement in our kitchen because everything's clearly labeled with what it is, a date, and the initials of who's responsible for it.
And I imagine the inspector kind of helped walk you through that part, right? And just kind of clarifying what you need to do. Are there even some handouts that they give you for kind of instructions?
Yeah, during our initial meetings with our inspector, we actually requested some of these materials, and our inspector was able to send over multiple documents that outlined everything that was needed on our end, from setting up the kitchen to how to maintain the kitchen properly.
So shifting gears a little bit, now that we've got our kitchens certified, I think one of the questions people might have is what you can make in a certified kitchen. We have a 20C kitchen license. Does that mean we can make anything we want in our kitchen, or are there still other restrictions?
I wish we could make anything we wanted, but we can't. We can, however, make many different types of foods and beverages. We can make bottled maple sap, multiple different types of confections. The only things that we can't make are alcohols, cider, wine, beer, and distilled spirits, because those are licensed by the state liquor authority. And then we also can't make meat and seafood products, and that's because the USDA regulates those. So any cooked meat or any food product that contains more than 2% cooked meat is actually regulated by the USDA. So the 20C license doesn't cover those products.
let's say next week you wanted to start making a new product, like some kind of new maple breakfast cereal that's new and creative and inventive on the market. Since you have that certified kitchen, can you go ahead and start making Fruit Loop maple cereal and start selling that next week?
So there's another step that you need to take for each product that you make. So if you're wanting to make a cereal, you need to run that through a process authority and get what's called a scheduled process. And so this is just a process that will tell you what are the concerns in making your food and what types of what we call critical control factors or factors that can cause some type of food safety issue, how we can reduce those. So you would need to record your water activity or your pH of that particular product in order to make sure it's safe. Once you go through the scheduled process, you'll have all of that information and you can make your product safely.
So just to clarify for our listeners, what I'm hearing is the certified kitchen process makes sure you have a safe place to manufacture food, but the scheduled process approval makes sure that each food item you're making is made in a food safe manner. So those are two different regulations, right?
That's exactly right.
And how do you go about, is that with the same inspector through Ag and Markets to get that scheduled process approval?
So a scheduled process is actually done through an individual that's titled as a process authority. At the Cornell Food Venture Center, you can get your scheduled process for less than $100 per product. So what you would do is you would have your product in the form that you plan to sell it in, including the packaging, and you would submit that along with a 2-page document that details how that product is produced, what ingredients are in it, and how you think it could be preserved, or if you don't know that, that's perfectly fine. You submit that documentation to the Food Venture Center, and they evaluate your product and will give you guidelines on how to keep that product safe when you're producing it commercially in your 20C. That process takes about 8 weeks.
So let's say that I'm a new producer. I haven't gone through, my kitchen's not quite certified yet, but I want to start making my maple Fruit Loop cereal. And I need to do the scheduled process. I need to get my kitchen certified. Which happens first? Do I get my kitchen certified and then go through the scheduled process, or do I start with the scheduled process approval?
So you can do them simultaneously because they're two separate organizations. But if you are not sure if you need a 20C license, then I would suggest getting your scheduled process completed first, because your inspector will ask to see your scheduled process so that they can know whether you need to have a 20C or if you're better suited for a home processor.
So I know there's a lot of gray area when it comes to some of these regulations, and it's confusing. It's confusing even for me to try to follow. One question I have is when it comes to some of the products that are made, like, so maple cream is exempt from needing a certified kitchen, but if you wanted to make a shelf-stable maple cream that doesn't need to be refrigerated, where you're adding potassium sorbate, then we're starting to add things. Or if we're making some certain types of infused syrups that need a certified kitchen, but do those still need that full scheduled process approval, since there's a lot of people making those and it's a common manufacturing process?
Yeah, so they will still need to go through the scheduled process with a process authority. If you're getting a scheduled process for a particular product, that will only be applicable for your organization.
So just to clarify for our listeners, you always need a scheduled process for your product. Even if someone else is making it the exact same way, you can't take their scheduled process approval and you need your own. And to be clear, maple cream, traditional maple cream, is a pure maple product with no food hazards and it's exempt. But if you make a shelf-stable cream that adds preservatives and has extra steps in the process, then you do have to produce that in a commercial kitchen, and just make that distinction.
Yeah, so there are a couple products that it may not be common knowledge that they will need to be produced in a commercial kitchen. And this is all because of food safety. We want to make sure those products are as safe as possible. Those will include maple creams that are stabilized with potassium sorbate and infused maple syrups. So the best approach is to have your product reviewed by a process authority, and they will be able to tell you what the hazards are. And then your inspector will be able to tell you whether those hazards are ones that require you to have a 20C kitchen or not.
Yeah, Catherine, I think that's a great point that's worth reemphasizing, is that the final word with what is required to be produced in a commercial kitchen lies with the regulatory authority, not us. So if you want to confirm whether your product needs to be produced in a certified kitchen, that's a question to ask Ag and Markets in New York State or your regulatory authority in the state that you're in. And it's really important to do that just to make sure that you're following the law.
Yeah.
I just want to back up here a little bit. And, obviously our listeners know that, maple is exempt, in New York and most other states as well, is exempt from needing a certified kitchen to produce pure maple products, right? So our maple syrup, our creams where you're not adding any preservatives, candies, sugars. So why did you both at the Arnot Forest decide that you wanted to go get a certified kitchen? What was your kind of idea or initiative behind it?
So the main reason we wanted to get a 20C commercial kitchen is because it helped us to get a perspective of what our New York State maple producers would go through when they certify their kitchens.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, that's really consistent with our philosophy at the Cornell Maple Program, where we do applied research. And to do that properly, I think we need to go through all the steps that commercial sugar makers go through, both to produce their syrup, to market their syrup, and also in this case, to make value-added products. So we're better educators and researchers if we go through the process ourselves. So that was the big motivation for getting our kitchen licensed. But it also gives us a lot of flexibility to do other types of research and do market tests and things like that. So it's a valuable resource for us too.
Why do you think a sugar maker should go through the process of getting a certified kitchen? I think historically, sugar makers have been apprehensive and want to avoid needing to go through that process. But why would you encourage someone to actually go through the process? Or would you encourage somebody to go through that process?
So the process of getting a 20C kitchen is a learning curve if you haven't done it before, but it's one that's worth doing if you want to make value-added products that are not approved for the home processors. So any maple producer that's wanting to make a special maple cereal or another product that has a food safety hazard should go through this process because they want their consumers to be safe.
And if I could add a point, there's so much opportunity in maple to make new products. For a long time, we've thought of maple as kind of limited to these few products, including pure maple syrup, candy, sugar, and cream, maybe a few other items. But maple syrup is a very flexible and useful food additive. And there's just so much opportunity if you want to diversify your operation or if you have good ideas about new treats or new confections. It's a way to make your sugar house stand out in a field where, let's face it, there are a lot more sugar houses coming online every year. So there is competition. And that's just one way you can stand out against the competition.
We're here to make the process easier for people. So if you have any trouble getting a hold of your state inspectors or don't know exactly who to contact, just reach out to us because we'll help point you in the direction of who you can contact or what agencies are best to go through, depending on your specific situation.
I think that's great that you're available, Catherine, to walk people through that step. It doesn't need to be as daunting as what it might seem, that you've gone through that process and you have that experience now to help folks. And, I think as you said, Aaron, it's great to be able to diversify and use maple for so much more than the traditional breakfast topping. How can we use it as sweeteners or flavorings and all kinds of different types of foods? You had mentioned, Catherine, something about the home processor's license. We've been focused on the 20C certified kitchen. So what is a home processor's license that you referred to? And I think some states call that kind of the cottage food license as well.
Yeah, it is called a cottage food license in most states. In New York State, it's called the home processor exemption. So with this, you can produce products that do not have food safety hazards, such as baked goods, coated nuts, lollipops, granola. There's actually a document on the Ag and Markets website where you can see what companies or who is registered as a home processor and what products they've registered and are approved to produce. So if you have any uncertainty about which products can be produced, you can look at that document.
So it sounds like there is quite a few different products can be made there, but let's just clarify, what is the difference between a home process kitchen versus your commercial certified kitchen that we've been talking about?
So the main difference is the types of foods that can be produced. In a home process kitchen, particularly in New York State, you can sell your products only to people in New York State. Whereas if you have a 20C license, you can sell within and outside of New York State. In addition to that, it's the different types of foods. So if you are producing a cereal or you're producing an infused syrup, then you would need to get a 20C license. And that's so that you can ensure that your product is being made safely.
So a home processor's kitchen, I'm assuming that is, not some separate kitchen that you have in your sugar house that's dedicated just for food production, but based on the name, it sounds like it can just be a kitchen, that's in your home that you're using for, cooking food for your family and everything like that. Is that correct? Or what are some of the differences between the home processors or the cottage food license versus the certified kitchen?
Yeah, so the main difference as far as the buildings go is that the home processor exemption can be used in your home kitchen. You can make the food products there. Whereas with a 20C license, you would have to have a separate facility. Now, that can be your garage. That would count as a separate facility as long as it has all of the other qualifications to meet a 20C. But it can also be your sugar house or a separate building or even a building that you rent.
I imagine the requirements are a little bit more relaxed as far as I think Aaron mentioned before, how, on the drains on your sink at the Arnot Forest there needed to be an air gap there. And so I would imagine in a home processor's kitchen, whether it's in your house or in your sugar house, that some of those regulations are not as stringent as what a certified kitchen would have.
Yeah, at a home kitchen, you are not required to follow as strict guidelines, but you are still expected to have things like good manufacturing practices. So you need to make sure your hands are washed or you're wearing gloves. If you are doing a home processor's kitchen, one thing that's important to know is that if you move to another facility, to another house, then you will need to go through the home processor's process again.
So with a certified kitchen, you mentioned that there's a spontaneous inspection, generally at least once a year for the home processor or a cottage food license. Is there any type of an inspection or is there an annual inspection with that?
As far as I know, there's not an inspection with the home processing license, but the State Department can request that your product be reviewed by a process authority. And if there is a complaint, then they can have an inspection scheduled for your home kitchen.
You alluded towards deciding whether you're going to go with a 20C commercial certified kitchen or, a home process or cottage license. So I'd imagine that, really depends on if you want to sell outside of the state or if you want to sell just within your own state and then the type of product that you're making. And so could producers reach out to you? Are you a good resource to kind of help make that decision?
Yeah, they can feel free to reach out to me. They can also reach out to the New York State Ag and Markets. Our inspector, Michael Wolf, has offered to help maple producers with specific questions if they're not able to get into contact with their inspector.
So one final question, Catherine. Say I'm a maple producer and I have an idea for a product that would require a certified kitchen, but I don't have the resources to build my own kitchen or I don't have space for one. Are there options available to rent certified kitchen space?
Yeah, there are quite a few shared kitchens available in New York State and in other states, and they will absolutely require that you have a process approval or a scheduled process for the products that you're making in that kitchen. But there are multiple different shared kitchens, and those are hosted by the Cornell Cooperative Extension, different church groups, and others across the state. Some of the ones in New York State are in different counties, including Tompkins, St. Lawrence, Broome, Niagara, and Sullivan County. So if you are near any of those and you want to have a shared kitchen, check them out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If you stop and think about all these kind of commercial kitchens that are around just your area, your town, that, you don't have to invest all that money into making your own commercial kitchens, that there's, church kitchens, like you mentioned, or VFWs or something like that might have a kitchen that would be happy to let you use that for maybe a very small fee, or maybe not even that allows them to utilize that space that maybe not being used that much in the first place anyways.
Yeah, good point.
But just to be clear, you would still need your own scheduled process approval in order to produce a product in someone else's kitchen space that you rent, right? Just to be absolutely crystal clear.
Yes, that is correct. The 20C is for the facility, and the schedule process is for that particular food product. So you want to keep them separate in your mind. And regardless of what 20C kitchen you use, you will need a schedule process for your product.
Yeah, so that's great because that opens up the opportunity to produce these more complex value-added products to a lot of producers, I think, if they can access kitchens in their local area without having to build their own facility.
I totally agree with you, Aaron. I think that's a great point, and we should see lots of maple products being made in every church basement kitchen across the state and Maple region.
Agreed.
Well, we're about out of time. Catherine, this has been really informative. But as we mentioned earlier, this is a complex topic and there's always more to learn. So before we wrap up, can you point folks towards resources where they can find more information?
Yeah. So the first place to check is the New York State Department of Ag and Markets website. And you can type in home processor exemption, or you can type in 20C and you'll find a lot of information. You can also check out the Cornell Food Venture Center and check out our program, the Cornell Maple Program. One other thing that I wanted to highlight is that we have a extension bulletin titled Getting Started Value-Added Products, and it goes over the step-by-step process that you would need to go through when you have a new product that you want to introduce into the market.
Where is that, the bulletin that you mentioned for getting started? Where can folks find that?
So we've actually released it in multiple places. You can find it on our website under the new product development page. You can also find it at mapleresearch.org and eCornell Commons.
And if people want to reach you directly, Catherine, where should they go so they can send their message to you?
So they could go to cornellmaple.com and contact me through the Contact Us page.
Great. Thanks for those resources, Catherine. This has been a great discussion to have. It's really helped clarify a few things for me, and I think this will be helpful for a lot of maple producers. And some things to think about is come up with ideas to make new maple products and diversify our maple outside of just maple syrup and candies and cream.
Yeah, that's great. I'm always here to help, and thank you guys for having me.
Great. Thanks again, Catherine, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Join us next time for another episode of Sweet Talk, all things maple.
Thank you for joining us for Sweet Talk, all things maple with Aaron and Adam. Sweet Talk is produced by the Cornell Maple Program and is made possible with funding from the New York State Maple Producers Association and the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. All music is obtained from Blue Dot Sessions. For more information on all things maple, visit cornellmaple.com. Have a sweet day.